What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
The Last Signal, Part 1. Petty Officer Sam Wilson gripped the railing of the Coast Guard cutter as it approached the listing cargo vessel through the pre-dawn gloom. The ship's SOS had been broadcasting for the past hour, a mechanical repetition that felt wrong against the absolute silence of the radio channels. No response to their hails, no chatter from other vessels, nothing but that single, automated distress call cutting through the dark. "Something's not right," he muttered, adjusting his tactical vest. The morning air carried an unfamiliar metallic smell that made his nose wrinkle. Through his binoculars, he could make out the vessel's name, Oriental Dawn. The massive container ship was sitting low in the water, its port side dipping ominously toward the steel-gray waves. "Multiple heat signatures detected on the main deck," called out Torres from the thermal imaging station. "They're moving erratically." The first hints of sunrise painted the eastern horizon in sick yellows and reds as they drew alongside. Water was already washing over the Oriental Dawn's port rails, and the groaning of the overstressed metal echoed across the water. Standard procedure was to board and assess, but everything about this felt wrong. Sam led the 4-person boarding team up the pilot's ladder, his boots finding purchase on the wet rungs. The ship's deck tilted at an uncomfortable angle beneath them as they climbed aboard. Empty shipping containers created a maze of towering steel walls, many having broken free of their moorings to crash against each other. "Hello?" Sam called out, his voice seeming to die in the heavy air. "U.S. Coast Guard! Is anyone—" A scream cut through the morning stillness, raw and animalistic. It came from behind a toppled container about 30 yards ahead. Sam signaled his team to advance, their boots splashing through the ankle-deep water that was steadily rising across the deck. The screaming stopped abruptly, replaced by wet, tearing sounds that made Sam's skin crawl. As they rounded the corner of the container, he saw them. 3 figures crouched over something that had been human. They turned at the sound of the approaching footsteps, revealing faces streaked with blood and eyes that held nothing human. "Jesus Christ," whispered Rodriguez behind him. The creatures, Sam refused to name what they looked like, lurched to their feet with unnatural speed. Their clothes were soaked in blood and seawater, their movements jerky yet purposeful. As they stumbled forward, more shapes emerged from between the containers, drawn by the commotion. "Back to the ladder!" Sam ordered, raising his sidearm. "Now!" But when they turned, they saw more of them blocking the retreat, having somehow circled behind them silently. The deck shifted again, another few degrees towards disaster, and Sam realized with growing horror that they were trapped between the rising water, the zombies, and the endless maze of containers on a ship that was slowly becoming their tomb. "New plan," he said, forcing his voice to remain steady as he counted their dwindling options. "We make for the bridge. Move!" As they ran, the ship groaned beneath them, like a dying thing, and the sounds of pursuit echoed off the steel walls of their container maze. Somewhere in the distance, emergency sirens began to wail across the coast, and Sam knew with terrible certainty that whatever was happening on this ship was only the beginning. Part 2. The bridge tower loomed ahead like a fortress, but reaching it meant crossing an expanse of open deck space. Sam led his team through the container maze, choosing their path carefully as the ship's list grew worse. Every few minutes, a container would break free of its restraints and crash against the deck, the sound echoing like thunder. "Wilson!" Torres grabbed his sleeve, pointing toward movement between 2 containers. A figure in a crew uniform stumbled into view, its neck bent at an impossible angle. Behind it came 3 more, including one in a captain's uniform, its white jaw now stained crimson. "Keep moving," Sam ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The rising water had reached their knees, making each step a battle against both the current and their own exhaustion. The morning sun now illuminated the horror around them in stark detail. Bloody handprints on containers, scattered personal effects floating in the water, and dark shapes moving beneath the surface. They reached the stairs leading to the bridge, only to find them partially submerged. Rodriguez took point, his rifle trained on the doorway above. The stairwell was clear, but as they climbed, the metallic stench grew stronger. "Check those magazines," Sam commanded, using his sleeve to wipe spray from his face. "We might need every round." He tried his radio again, but only static answered. Whatever was happening here, they were on their own. The bridge door was ajar, swaying with the ship's movement. Inside, screams still flickered with life, casting an eerie blue glow across the scattered papers and overturned chairs. A trail of blood led to the radio room. "Holy shit," breathed Martinez, the newest member of their team. "Look at the radar." The screen showed dozens of vessels in the surrounding waters, but many were moving erratically or not at all. Some were clearly adrift, while others seemed to be deliberately running themselves aground along the coast. A gurgling sound from the radio room snapped their attention back to the immediate threat. Sam raised his hand, signaling the team to hold position. He edged forward, weapon ready, and peered around the doorframe. The radio operator was still there, or what remained of him. His hands were cuffed to the radio equipment, his final transmission still repeating on the emergency channel. A bullet wound at his temple told Sam all he needed to know. The man had chosen his own way out. "We need to get off this ship," Torres said, voicing what they all knew. "But the ladder is probably underwater by now." Sam moved to the windows, studying the vessel's angle. They had maybe 20 minutes before the list became critical. "There!" He pointed to a lifeboat station on the starboard side. "If we can reach that..." The door behind them burst open. What had once been the ship's first officer lurched through, followed by more of the crew. Their skin had taken on a grayish tinge, and their movements were more coordinated than before, as if they were learning. Martinez opened fire first, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The creatures jerked as rounds struck them but didn't fall. Sam grabbed a fire axe from the wall and swung it in a desperate arc, buying them seconds to retreat. "The deck!" he shouted. "Go!" They burst out onto the exterior walkway, only to find themselves caught between the growing horde behind them and a 30-foot drop to the water-covered deck below. The ship groaned again, shifting another few degrees. Sam looked at his team, then at the lifeboat station across the expansive tilted deck. They had one shot at this, and the odds were getting worse with the second. "When I say run," he said, gripping the axe tighter as shadows filled the door behind them, "don't stop for anything." Part 3. "Run!" Sam's voice cut through the chaos as he swung the fire axe on the nearest zombie, creating a momentary gap in the doorway. The team sprinted along the exterior walkway, boots clanging on the metal grating. Behind them, the infected crew members poured out on the bridge like a nightmare tide. The ship's increasing tilt worked both for and against them. It slowed their pursuers but made every step treacherous. Torres lost his footing and slammed into the railing, his rifle clattering away into the containers below. "There!" Rodriguez pointed to a maintenance ladder descending to the main deck. It was their only chance of reaching the lifeboat station. Sam did a quick head count. All four still alive. All still moving. For now. Martinez went down first, then Torres. Sam could hear the zombies getting closer, their unnatural movements producing a cacophony of scraping sounds against the metal walkway. He glanced back and immediately wished he hadn't. The infected crew's face was contorted into permanent snarls, their clothes now soaked with both seawater and the blood of their victims. "Go!" Sam pushed Rodriguez toward the ladder. A zombie lunged for them, its fingers grazing Rodriguez's tactical vest before Sam buried the axe into its chest. The creature stumbled but didn't fall, its dead eyes fixed on them with terrible focus. Sam swung himself onto the ladder, just as more zombies reached their position. He descended as fast as he dared, the metal rungs slick with spray and whatever dark fluid dripped from the creatures above. The main deck was now a deadly obstacle course. Containers continued to shift and slide as the ship's list worsened, creating new dangers with each passing minute. Waist-deep water churned between the steel canyons, and somewhere in that murky depth, Sam knew more of the infected waited. "We've got movement in the water!" Torres called out, his voice tight with fear. Dark shapes moved beneath the surface, circling their position like sharks. "Stay together!" Sam ordered. "Martinez, watch our 6. Rodriguez, find us a path to that lifeboat." They moved as one unit, watching each other's blind spots as they waded through the rising water. The lifeboat station was maybe 50 yards away, but it might as well have been 50 miles. Every few steps, a container would shift a thunderous groan, forcing them to change course. A hand shot up from the water, grabbing Martinez's leg. The young guardsman screamed and opened fire into the depths, the muzzle flash illuminating more infected bodies moving beneath the surface. The water around them began to churn as more zombies rose from the depths. "Break it up!" Sam shouted. They abandoned any pretense of stealth and ran, splashing through the flood as fast as they could manage. Behind them, the bridge tower where they'd been minutes ago finally succumbed to the list, glass shattering as it met the water. The ship gave an almighty shudder, and Sam knew they were out of time. The entire vessel was about to roll. Containers began to slide en masse, creating a domino effect of steel and death. The water level rose rapidly as the ship's roll accelerated. They reached the lifeboat station just as a wave of infected crested the water behind them. Sam slammed his hand on the release mechanism, praying it still worked despite the ship's angle. The davits creaked in protest as the lifeboat began to move, but something was wrong. The mechanism was jamming, the boat only partially deploying, and now they were surrounded, infected crew members approaching from all sides, more rising from the water, and the ship itself trying to kill them with every passing second. Sam looked at his team's face, saw the same desperate determination in their eyes, and made a decision that would either save them or doom them all. Part 4. "Torres, Rodriguez, get that winch moving manually. Martinez, give me your belt." Sam shouted over the groaning metal. The ship was rolling faster now, the deck angle approaching 45 degrees. He looped Martinez's belt through the lifeboat's stuck mechanism, creating a makeshift lever. The infected were closing in from all sides. A female crew member in a shredded uniform lunged at Martinez, who barely managed to kick her back into the churning water. More zombies climbed over the railings, their movements becoming more coordinated with each passing minute. "On 3!" Sam braced himself against the railing. 1, 2, 3! He and Martinez threw their full weight against the belt while Torres and Rodriguez cranked the manual winch. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, with a shriek of protesting metal, the mechanism broke free. The lifeboat swung out over the tilting deck, now their only escape route. "Inside! Move!" Sam provided covering fire as his team scrambled into the lifeboat. The ship's roll had become critical. Containers were breaking free of their moorings and waves now, creating a domino effect of sliding steel that crushed everything in its path, including the infected. A massive wave crashed across the deck as the ship continued its death roll. Sam felt his feet losing purchase on the slick metal. Behind him, a wall of zombies advanced, unconcerned by the chaos around them. He backed toward the lifeboat, counting his remaining ammunition. 4 rounds. Not nearly enough. "Wilson, jump!" Torres reached out from the lifeboat, which swung wildly on its davits. The distance had grown nearly 10 feet with the ship's increasing tilt. Sam took 2 steps back, knowing he'd have one chance at this. The nearest zombie, a massive engineer with half his face missing, grabbed for Sam's tactical vest. Sam ducked under the grasping hands and sprinted forward, using a fallen pipe as a springboard. For a moment, he was airborne over the rolling water, the dawn sky wheeling above him. His fingers caught the lifeboat's edge. Torres and Rodriguez hauled him in just as the ship gave a final thunderous groan. The Oriental Dawn was going down, and it was taking its infected crew with it. Cut the lines! Sam scrambled to his feet. Cut them now! Martinez hacked at the rear cable with his combat knife while Rodriguez worked on the forward one. The lifeboat tilted dangerously as the ship began its final plunge. Infected crew members reached for them from the water, their gray hands slapping against the hull. The forward line snapped with a whip-crack report. The boat swung violently, now held by only the rear cable. Water churned around them as the massive ship's hull created a whirlpool effect. They were being pulled down with it. Sam grabbed Martinez's knife and slashed at the remaining line, his arms burning with the effort. The cable frayed, individual strands snapping one by one. A zombie managed to get its arm over the gunwale, and Torres smashed it back with an oar. The last strand of the cable parted. Their lifeboat shot backward, carried by the wave of the sinking ship's displacement. They were thrown about like rag dolls as the boat spun in the turbulent water. Through the spray, Sam watched the Oriental Dawn's final moments as it slipped beneath the waves, taking its horrific cargo to the depths. But their relief was short-lived. As the water settled and dawn fully broke over the horizon, they saw what awaited them. The coastline was visible several miles away, and even from this distance, they could see multiple fires burning. More ships drifted aimlessly in the waters around them, some listing, others already beginning to sink. Emergency sirens wailed across the water, their sound carrying an unmistakable message. This was only the beginning. Part 5. The morning sun climbed higher as their lifeboat drifted in the gentle swells, the chaos of their escape now replaced by an eerie calm. Sam watched the last air bubbles from the Oriental Dawn break the surface while his team tended to the injuries. Mostly cuts and bruises, though Martinez had a nasty gash in his forearm from their frantic escape. "Anyone got a radio?" Sam asked, but he already knew the answer. Their equipment was waterlogged, and the strange static that had played their communications earlier still filled every channel they tried. "Look!" Torres pointed toward the coast. Through the morning haze, they could see more clearly now what they'd only glimpsed before. Multiple vessels had run aground along the shoreline. Smoke rose from at least 3 different locations in the city, and even from this distance, they could see unusual movement patterns in the streets, crowds flowing like spilled water between buildings. "Those car alarms," Rodriguez said quietly. "They're getting more frequent." He was right. The distant wail of sirens had been joined by a growing chorus of car alarms, creating a symphony of chaos that carried across the water. Helicopters, both military and civilian, crisscrossed the sky over the city, and occasionally they could hear what sounded like gunfire. "Okay, we need to make a decision," Sam said, checking his supplies. The lifeboat was well stocked. Flares, fresh water, emergency rations. But he knew staying at sea wasn't an option. The Coast Guard base or the marina? A massive explosion bloomed over the commercial district downtown, sending a mushroom cloud of smoke into the sky. The shockwave reached them seconds later, rippling across the water. "Marina," they all said in unison. The Coast Guard base was close to the city center, where things were clearly deteriorating rapidly. Sam and Torres took the oars while Rodriguez kept watch and Martinez tended his wound. As they rowed, they passed in other vessels, some abandoned, others with desperate faces peering from behind locked doors. A yacht burned in the distance, its hull already slipping beneath the waves. They saw things moving in the water occasionally, but kept their eyes fixed on their destination. The marina came into view, its usually bustling docks eerily still. Most of the pleasure craft were still moored, their owners presumably caught inland when whatever this was began. Cars filled the parking lot, many with doors left open in haste. "Over there!" Sam pointed to a secluded service dock partially hidden by a repair shed. "We'll be less exposed." As they approached, a familiar sound carried across the water, the wet, guttural moaning they'd heard on the ship. 2 figures shambled along the main dock, their movements leaving no doubt about their condition. Sam raised his hand for silence as they glided past, using the current to drift toward their chosen landing spot. They secured the lifeboat quietly, each of them scanning the marina for movement. The infected they'd seen wandered out of view, but somewhere in the distance, someone screamed. "We hole up in the repair shop," Sam whispered, checking his weapon low on last time. Get our bearings, try to raise any one of the emergency frequencies. Then we figure out our next move. And if we can't raise anyone? Martinez asked, his young face showing the strain of everything they'd witnessed. Sam looked at his team. These men he'd led into hell and somehow gotten back out, then turned to the chaos consuming the shoreline. The infection was spreading. They'd seen enough to know that. But they were Coast Guard. They had a duty. Then we do what we're trained to do, he said firmly. We help who we can. We fight what we must, and we don't stop until we find somewhere safe, or... He left the alternative unspoken. They moved toward the shed in formation, weapons ready, as more explosions illuminated the city behind them. The Oriental Dawn had been just the beginning, Sam realized. The real test of survival was just about to begin. Stay sharp, he whispered as they reached the shed's door. And stay together. Whatever's coming next, we face it as a team. Torres picked the lock while the others provided cover. As the door swung open, revealing the darkness within, Sam took one last look at the burning horizon. Somewhere out there, other Coast Guard units were facing the same nightmare. He silently wished them luck. Then he stepped inside with his team, ready to face whatever this new world had in store for them. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one. I don't know if I've heard many stories about the Coast Guard during a zombie apocalypse. I know there would be a ton of people that would basically just run for the water as soon as any kind of like zombie related things happen. There's a bunch of stories where they show how crazy that gets, where pretty much anybody's just trying to get on some kind of life raft off the mainland and into the water. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting to have a story where there's some Coast Guardmen that try to go help a vessel for an SOS, and it goes to shit like this. So I hope you enjoy that story. Come back next time for some more scary stories. And as always, remember to face your fears.